Thank you for coming. I think it's now just going to be tradition with any kind of Zoom calls that we're going to have technical. Here we are, but that's okay. We make this work. Um, as Mercedes said, Carlson, I've written this book, and I'm very happy to um, basically do talk about photo editing. Really, I have to double check, Mercedes. Is my video prominent? It looks like the Rocky
Yes,
Nook
we can see you.
sign. Okay, all right. Just making sure. Gotta love. There we go. Now I'm spotlighted. Gotta love Zoom controls. Um, okay, so today I'm going to be talking about editing portraits in Luminar. If you've checked out any of the previous webinars that we've done, I've talked about kind of a general overview of what Luminar does. We did one that covered more advanced techniques such as masking and layers. And then a few weeks ago, we did one editing black and white photos in Luminar. And so it seemed like for the next topic, we could really do uh, sort of specialty of Luminar, and one of the reasons that Luminar sets itself apart from some of the other photo editors. So there are lots of ways to edit portraits. If you know anything about portrait retouching, it is a deep rabbit hole that can be either super easy or in most cases it can get really complicated. Especially, there are people who do this for a living. And if I can just throw in a quick plug, my podcast, Photo Active, we just did an episode about sort of general retouching. And we have one coming up where we talk to a retoucher. And, it's one of those topics that if you want to do it well, you have to know a lot. You have to know all sorts of different techniques. And so I think for most people, it's kind of out of their range of expertise. If you want to get into it, great. But most of the time, we find ourselves with pictures of family, or maybe we've done a photo shoot. Maybe you shoot weddings or portraits, and there are things that you want to fix, or there are things that you want to augment, and you don't really want to spend a whole lot of time on it. You don't want to become a professional retoucher. Like that's kind of the thing. So what Luminar does, Luminar some dedicated portrait retouching tools that make very common operations better, and it does it using a lot of the machine learning technology. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk through editing one photo that kind of hits on a lot of the things that I've. Some of it is just dealing with specific facial features. It's going to deal with some of just general, excuse me, general, looking at a photo and seeing what it needs overall. But as a consequence, we're also going to we're going to touch on um, doing some layers and doing some masking, and so hopefully by the end of this, you'll see that touching in Luminar is extremely accessible, and if you only need to do a couple of things, then you're golden. And if you have something that's more advanced, Luminar is also capable of that. So, I'm going to talk about that. I'm also going to talk a little bit about how it works for multiple people, and demonstrate a high key look. And if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about batch processing. So, first step. Oh, and also, I believe Mercedes mentioned this. If you have questions, put them in the Q&A. I'm not going to be able to see them, but Mercedes can jump in at any time and say, "Hey Jeff, we have some question," or after I finish each image, we'll stop for questions. So please ask your questions, and I will do my best to answer them. So I'm going to share my desktop here. And I'm going to switch to my good friend Luminar 4. The photo that we're going to start with is this photo here. Also standard disclaimers, because this is being broadcast over a Zoom connection. Hopefully you'll be able to see all the detail, but sometimes the video gets compressed. When the video gets reposted later, you'll be able to see that in higher detail. So be sure to check that out if for some reason, our connections aren't robust enough to really show this. Okay, so here's a photo. This is my sister-in-law. And what I like to do with sort of any photo is take a look and see what the photo needs. There are, areas that I can see that need to be fixed. There are areas where, like an idea that I had when I shot the picture didn't quite translate, and that I can sort of augment that a little bit in my editing. So let's tackle a few things first. Right now, what I like about this is I like the light coming through the window. I like obviously her posture, even though the image is a little skewed. I actually cropped that at one point to make the background lines straight up and down, and I didn't like it as much. So I kind of like that it's a little angled, and we're photographers. We can make that choice. That's great. But I also noticed that it's pretty dark. If you look up here at the histogram, which I always recommend looking at the histogram, you can see that there's a lot of blacks, dark areas on the left, not a whole lot of whites over on the right. So we need to build up the shadows a bit. We need to just get a better tonal representation that's going to be just a better overall image, regardless of whether it's a portrait or not. We also have a little bit of somebody's fingers sticking in here that we'll get rid of. But although that's going to annoy me this whole time, I'm going to wait for a specific reason to deal with that until later. So let's just, first of all, in Luminar, we're going to go to the AI Enhance tool. This is the drag a slider and make it better. And the way I always approach this is I always just give it a shot, see what it does. So if I increase that quite a bit, it's done a number of things. It's definitely, it's brought up the light, the overall exposure. It's brought up some of the saturation, and I'm not entirely crazy about that. And there's still just, in her torso is still really, really dark. We're not getting any definition there. So I think, that's a fine thing to try. But I'm going to instead go to the light tool. And the way I like to edit is I click it on advanced settings, and that lets me access the whites and the blacks. Now, if you've read my book or you've seen my webinars before, I like doing this because obviously, one issue is exposure. And if I just pump up the exposure slider, it definitely brightens things up, but it's too much. It's just this huge cannon of light. We don't want to do that. So I'm going to double click that to bring it back to its 0. And instead, looking at the histogram, I'm going to increase the whites. That's going to bring up some of the color, or sorry, some of the tone. I'm going to decrease the blacks just because I am in the habit of doing that, and it provides a little more contrast without having to hit that contrast slider. And then I think the thing that's going to make the biggest difference here is I'm just going to open up the shadows a bit. And that is getting to be a little bit better. It's a little bright over here on the left, so I can take the highlights control and bring those down. So I'm going to, if I hold the backslash key, I can see a before and after. There's a before and after tool at the top of the window, but the funny thing is when I'm doing a Zoom call, when I put my mouse up there, I get the Zoom toolbar, which I can probably move, but I'm not going to bother with that right now because, you know, given the way I've started today, I'd probably disconnect the call and then we'd be all done. Instead, so we're going to do, come here, there's the before, there's the after. All right, already this is better. Now, I can also see some problems. For one thing, she's a little red, and I think some of that is the lighting in the cafe, and some of it, you know, might just be her complexion. But for this photo, it's really too red. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, also still in the light tool, I'm going to go to the red curve and just bring that down a little bit. And what that's doing is it's removing red in the entire image. So she looks a little more natural. She doesn't look like there's a red spotlight on her face. And I think just in terms of color, I'm going to reduce the saturation just a little bit for good measure. All right. So already this is a better image, I think, at least in terms of tone. Obviously, I could like tweak some more. I'm going to reduce the highlights. But then, you know, you get into that photographer's editing feedback loop where you're like, well, you know, maybe I just need to do a little bit here and a little bit here. And then an hour has gone by and you don't know why you missed dinner. So let's now turn to some of the specific portrait tools. Now, over here, there's a whole category called portrait. And we're going to do a few different things. In fact, I'm going to zoom in a little bit further. The beauty of Luminar's approach to this is because it's using AI, so you have these two tools, AI Skin Enhancer, AI Portrait Enhancer. And what that means is I don't have to do any masking. I don't have to tell the software where the face is. I don't have to, you know, paint and, you know, say like for example, if I want to add some light to her face, if I were in Lightroom, I would have to create a radial gradient and put that on sort of the general shape. What Luminar does is it's already looked at the image and it says, oh, that looks like a person. And that is a person's face, and that's the eyes and the nose and the mouth. And so it has figured all of that out. So for us as photographers, all we have to do is focus on the result that we wanted to get. So for example, I'm going to go to the AI Portrait Enhancer. There are a lot of different controls here specific to different parts of the face. So one of the first things I do almost always is increase the eye enhancer. So I'm going to do that. And what that does is it adds a little bit of brightness, a little bit of contrast to her eyes. Not so much that she, you know, looks like a scary demon, but that there's just like, it gets a little bit more of the catch light. You see there's a little catch light from the window. There's just a little bit more of that. And so when we zoom out, like her eyes just pop a little more. And that's good because when you're taking pictures of people, we're naturally drawn to the eyes. So I'll zoom back in. And we can do a few other things. Everybody has dark circles. I almost always try the dark circles removal. And what I will do next is, so I'm going to do that quite a bit. What I want you to look at while I'm doing this is all of these enhancements, they aren't going overboard. I mean, like this dark circles removal, I've set to 78, which is pretty high, but she's not suddenly like an inverse raccoon with just totally white eyes. The tools are nicely balanced, so like you really have to work hard to make somebody look really bad. And I appreciate that a lot. What else can we do here? So there are a few things like maybe eye whitening, kind of depends on the image. I'm not sure if that made a difference. There are a few things here like slim face 2.0 and enlarge eyes. I typically ignore those, partially because we're not going for that super airbrushed high fashion model look, which I think is actually just going out of style. What these these tools, I mean, I suppose I could do enlarge eyes, but then it's going to be like, again, not overdone, but it's just bad. Slim face is actually good when you have a photo of somebody that was shot with a wide angle lens. If you've got some lens distortion that sort of made them look unnaturally wide, maybe you're shooting up this way. So that's kind of where slim face goes in. But honestly, human faces are great. They don't really need to be slimmed. So I'm going to ignore that. And then we have like some kind of specific things like improve eyebrows, which seems almost too specific, but just adding like a little bit of darkness to the eyebrows sometimes can make it either pop or blend in a little bit. This is not really an issue with her. And then if we wanted to do like a little bit of teeth whitening, a little bit of say maybe lips darkening, we don't really need her to look like she's completely put on lipstick for a day out at the cafe. But there are certain shots where either somebody has like really pale lips and there's no definition there, or maybe you are working on something fashionable where you have a model who's wearing lipstick and you want that to just be accentuated a little bit more. The main thing I want you to come away with this specific part is I'm not having to do any sort of selections. I just trust that it knows where the lips are. It knows where the teeth are. And that's incredibly freeing if you've ever had to do any sort of other, portrait retouching or portrait adjusting. Now, one thing that I almost always use, I said I hit the eye enhancer first, but I almost always increase the face light. And even before Luminar, this is something that I would do in a lot of photos where somebody's face was a little bit in shadow, or perhaps like because it's the face, because it's the person, that's what you want to draw attention to. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to increase the face light. Actually, I'm going to increase this a lot just so you can see the difference. So this is way too much, but you can also see that it's increased the light on her face. It hasn't hit it like with a massive exposure adjustment, which is nice. It's just it's sort of smartly brought up the light, but none of the surrounding areas have been affected. So it's genuinely just working on her face. So I'm just going to bring that up just a little bit. Again, we have the advantage here that she's sitting by a window, but I just find that like a little bit of face light, even in group photos, helps a lot. So next thing I want to look at is, zoom in again, skin smoothing. Now this is kind of a minefield, right? Because if we wanted to go super, I don't even want to say super high fashion, just if we wanted to go to the extreme, there are ways that you could make her face super smooth, her skin super smooth. But too often, like it makes somebody look like a mannequin. And we don't want that. Wrinkles are good, texture is good. But sometimes you want to kind of minimize that, especially if you're doing like maybe a headshot for somebody. You want to give just a little bit of just a little better quality without going crazy. So what I'm going to do here is in the AI Skin Enhancer, Again, this is just a slider. I'm going to increase this, say about halfway. Now, I'm going to make sure that that comes through the video feed. Now, notice a couple of things. One, if I turn this off, we'll do like a before, and this is just for the skin enhancer, before and after. So it's fixed a little bit of the sort of modeling look, mottling, not modeling, on her forehead. You know, little smoother cheeks. She's not miraculously, you know, 20 years younger. We're not going for that look. We are just making it a little bit more favorable. But, you know, I want you to see here, you know, zoom in even more. Like there's still texture, and that's the key. There's some software out there that will just, you know, well, like with Zoom or some other apps that are like, you know, touch up my appearance, and like you kind of look like someone put Vaseline on the lens. Here, like we still see the texture of her skin, even if I cranked it way up. Like there's still some texture. That's overdone to me, but it's given a oh, what's the word? Just a more favorable appearance, right? There's some shine removal. I'm not sure how much this is going to affect this particular photo, but it can, you know, cut down some of that glare. And there's not really a need for it on this, but there's this AI skin defects removal control. And basically, it's going to just take a look and see if there are any you know, spots or moles that need to be dealt with. Here, I don't think it's come up with anything. Okay. So here we are. If we do a before and after, here's a before, here's after. So this is a more pleasing portrait. I like the tones better, and the light on her face is better. So what can we do next? There are a few things. One thing is so I love the fact that she's got this bright red hair being hit by the window light. And I want to bring a little bit of that into the hair that's cascading down around her neck. So to do that, I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. So right now, everything has been worked on just the main image itself. And the way Luminar works is all of these adjustments that we've made are all non-destructive. So we can turn them on or off or what have you. And it all just applies to one layer. Now, if I wanted to, I could, and what I'm going to do is create a new adjustment layer. And what that does is that lets us use all of the tools, but on a separate layer. So it's not going to affect anything that we've done before. And I'll show you why I'm doing this on an adjustment layer in just a minute. So I'm going to go back to our light panel. And I'm going to just looking at the hair right here, like it's these highlights that I want to boost. So I'm going to go back to my whites. Now, when I do this, it's going to affect the entire image, but that's okay for right now. Because again, all we're doing, we're looking at these highlights down here. And maybe we'll increase the shadows a little bit. Now, if I turn off that layer, you can see the difference. And now what we're going to do is go back to our light tool. Another interesting thing about Luminar is that every tool can have its own mask. Typically in Photoshop and other applications, if you do have layers and if you do have masking, then the mask is stuck to that layer, it's specific to that layer. And you can also do that here. But in this case, because I'm only dealing with the light tool, I'm going to create a mask, use a brush mask. And now you'll see, I'm going to move this here. I'm going to paint this adjustment right on these highlight areas. Like it's just those areas right there that I want this particular effect to be applied to. And then once I stopped clicking there, you'll see that only this area has those adjustments. All the tone went back to normal. Now I can paint a little bit over here. So now we have, zoom back out. So now we just have a little bit more attention on her beautiful red hair. Now, if I wanted to, excuse me, I have this ability to change the adjustment just for this layer. So this gives you a bit more control of all the adjustments that have been applied for that layer. That's going to come into that's going to be important in just a little bit. All right, so now this is looking pretty good. I think now it's time to erase those fingers. It's been driving me crazy. The reason I've waited so long is this. When you use the erase tool, so we're going to go into the canvas tools in Luminar. We're going to click the erase tool. And the erase tool is actually, I have to give them credit. They've done a really good job of basically having the software automatically remove things that you want removed. So I'm just going to paint over this spot. It's just those fingers, right? And see if there's anything else that needs it. No, not right now. And then when I click the erase tool, it thinks about it for a second, and the fingers are gone. No longer distracting. I'm going to click done. It's going to apply that. Now, with the erase tool and the clone and stamp tool, the reason I waited to do that, even though the fingers were annoying me right at the very beginning, is that when you erase something or use clone and stamp, it creates a new image layer. And that image layer basically burns in all the edits that you've done so far and kind of provides a new baseline. Now, I can absolutely go back and make adjustments in my other layers to some of the tools that I've already started with, but that won't be reflected here because this is basically like a new image on top. So whenever you're using the erase tool or the clone and stamp tool, like save that for the end, because then you're sort of burning things in. It's not a big deal. It's just as long as you're aware of that for your workflow, it makes things a lot better. Okay, next step here. Have you ever watched Bob Ross paintings? You know, the Bob Ross show. And if you have, maybe you had my experience, which was you're watching and he's making, you know, the pretty forests and, you know, a gorgeous landscape view, and he's painting, and you're thinking, wow, that looks pretty good. And then he like adds something, he adds something that just seems to ruin it all, right? That's what I'm going to do. So I beg your patience. I'm going to do something that is going to look really bad at first, but I think it's going to have a good result. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another new adjustment layer. And actually, I wonder, no, I'm going to push on and then we'll do questions. Okay. Again, with an adjustment layer, I have all the tools available to me, and any edit that I make will just be specific to that layer. So these adjustments are now going to apply to that erased image layer. Just if you're not familiar with layers in general, whatever's on top, it is sort of builds on everything below. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add sun rays. And I apologize for anybody who just cringed, because seriously, when Skylum introduced the sun rays feature, I was like, no, 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 bad, bad idea. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to add some sun rays. And this is where I say, Jeff, you've ruined it all. I can place the sun center right in her forehead. No. One interesting thing about sun rays, it actually does a fairly good job of detecting when it's behind an object, but that's not what we're dealing with here. What I want, my goal here, is to kind of add a little bit more of that light coming through the window. Obviously, she's illuminated, but it's not like the picture that I have in my head. And what's great is if this doesn't work, we can totally delete it, forget it ever happened. I guess it'll always be on this video, but we'll just skip ahead 5 minutes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the sun rays out the window, right? And now, if I were to stop there, it would be terrible, but we're not going to stop there. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the penetration, and that just helps. That's the amount that it's looking for different objects in the scene that it might be in front of or behind. For example, like if you had a lighthouse and you move the sun behind the lighthouse, it would actually occlude based on the shape of that lighthouse. It's actually, I hate to admit it, but it's a really well thought out tool. We're going to open the advanced settings, and we're going to change the number of sun rays to 0. And now we have just some sort of soft, cloudy light coming through the window. Now I can change the length. We can make it really, really intense here, or make it very, very small. But I want like I'm looking for that sort of hazy morning glow that you sometimes see coming through the window. And because we already know where the light's coming from, we can do this. Now, quite honestly, that doesn't look too bad. However, it's a little much. So going back to our layers, as I mentioned earlier, and click Done. And you go back to our layers. And because that is the only adjustment that I have on this adjustment layer, I can bring the adjustments amount down. This is basically like changing the opacity of a layer. So I can bring that down so that we have like just kind of a hint of that cloudy light coming through without it look like someone's standing outside with a big pro photo light or something. So what we have here now is, just kind of go back here. This image, I think, does a couple of things. A, it fixes some of the shortcomings in the first place. It also has that kind of dreamy quality that I had in mind when I was shooting it, because I loved that window light. And so by adding just a little bit of those sun rays, it gives a little more atmosphere, a little more texture. There are other tools that I could use, possibly, like there's a mystical tool, which kind of makes me laugh, makes things kind of fuzzy. I could go super crazy and do like a soft super glow. And honestly, there are times when you want that look. This is not one of those times, so I'm going to turn that off. But if we look at our before and after, here's our before. It was too dark. There was a little bit too much definition, and of course the fingers that were driving me crazy. And even though it's beautiful light, it didn't really do what I had in mind. And here's the after. Okay, so that is a walkthrough of this. Do we have any questions before I jump to the next thing?
We do have a couple questions. Let's see here.
Okay.
Okay, that was just a comment, sorry. When all adjustments are done, how do you save the new photo and the original photo on the PC. I think that's what they mean. They said how to save the new photo besides the ancient one on the PC.
Okay, that's a good question. There are a couple of different ways to do it. So you can export the image. As I said, all of these adjustments are non-destructive, and so when you bring it into Luminar, it's going to be added to your library. In this case, I've just pointed a folder at some files on disk, and I created an album for it. Yeah, this album right here. And so the original remains untouched. If you wanted to like see both of those in a separate way, you could export it and put it in the same folder, and then you would have those two. Or what you can do is you can always go back to the there's a history panel here. So if you wanted to just revert back to the original, you could jump down to there and start over. Or you could say, when I got to this point up here when I was like, hey, maybe I should do sun rays. Wow, that really went sideways. So I'm just gonna start again from that point. So there are a couple of different ways Luminar works. So this is with a photo that's been added to the library. You can also just open like an individual photo, which gets added to the library in a slightly different way. Or if you have Lightroom Classic or Photoshop, there are plugins that let you round trip those. So like, let's say you're in Lightroom Classic and you say, wow, Lightroom Classic doesn't have sun rays. I really want sun rays. So you can then use the plugin to open the image in Luminar. And what Lightroom does is it creates a high resolution TIFF and opens that in Luminar. Luminar, you make your adjustments, and then when you click apply, that gets round tripped back as an edited version. So there are a couple of different ways to do that.
Great, thank you. Another question we have is, can you name the various adjustment layers?
Yes. I didn't do that just for time, but if I click here, I can say rename layer and do sun rays, what were you thinking? Yeah, and especially once you start adding more adjustment layers, you definitely want to name them just to, keep things straight.
Thanks. Those are the only questions we have right now. So
okay. I also saw somebody say that this little corner up here is distracting. And I will say, yes, it kind of is. So just because we have a minute, let's just see what happens. If I were to use the erase tool, just to see. This may work, this may not work. Sometimes a clone and stamp is better. It's actually not bad. Okay. So that's kind of the overview, starting from scratch. Here's how we would take kind of a typical portrait and work it. What I want to show right now is a couple variations on the tools. So and I'm not going to go as thorough as I did for that, but going back to the AI, you saw that in this photo, Luminar said, okay, there's a face and I can use my portrait tool specific to that face. What if you have more than one person, more than one face or more than one person in the image? What's nice is Luminar can handle that. So in this picture, and again, I'm not going to go into all the different details. We'll use face light as an example because it's a really good way to show this. Luminar already knows that there are two people in this image. You don't have to do anything about it. In fact, you don't even get to see the mask that it uses, the built-in one. Excuse me. So I'm going to just increase the face light, and you can see that it's being applied to both people in this image. And I believe that like that would work even if you have, let's see, if we go back here, we have this image where we've got 5 people. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, there's no hard limit as to how many people it's going to see. Now, what you'll sometimes run into is if Luminar can't identify a face, maybe somebody is like turned enough that it's not really seeing it, then these portrait controls just won't even show up. That's kind of a good way to know how that works. You know, and that applies to the AI skin enhancer too, as soon as it loads. You know, if I wanted to smooth their skin, I could do that quick and easy. Or, you know, maybe I look at this and I say, okay, well, like I want skin smoothed on one person, but maybe not the other. And that would be an occasion where you could create a layer, create a new adjustment layer, and where did we go? Apply this. And this is where I'm not trying to do anything remotely, you know, precise for this, but and then edit the mask so that only the mask applies to one person and not the other. Okay, that was a really quick look at how it deals with multiple people. And if you received my newsletter announcing this, you saw this picture here. This is a picture from like an actual photo shoot, portrait session that I did. And sometimes you want to be like not just, you know, fixing things for the sake of you know, bringing out tones and color and all of that. Sometimes you want a specific look, especially with portraits. Like this high key look is often really a nice variation. So there's a high key tool, and what that's going to do is I'm just going to bring this all the way up. High key is just basically, you know, blasting the whole thing with light in a deliberate way. I'm going to increase this a little bit, increase that a little bit, go to my advanced settings, turn the saturation down, and then suddenly you've got this sort of, you know, famous black and white high key portrait look without having to really do much about it. I can, you know, reduce the blacks, make it more contrasty. And of course, I can also do all of the other, you know, tonal adjustments and all of the other tools. But this is like kind of a one-stop. Hey, I want this specific look, and I can do it pretty much all from this one tool. All right, last thing I'm going to show, and then we can jump to the rest of the questions if there are more questions. I mentioned that the AI can see multiple people. Again, because the AI is looking for faces, it's identifying what's in the image. This is really great if you have a series of shots from a photo shoot that you want to apply in the same way, but maybe you know, the person is moved. So for this example, this was a photo shoot I did earlier this year, and you know, let me actually go back to the, so when you're looking at these shots, they're all just a little bit different. Partially that's because, you know, she was moving while I was shooting. I was also moving a lot because I was trying to frame it so that you could see the background of this interesting building behind her, but not so much the rooftop, right? And so I probably looked like I was on a spring or something, kind of moving around, trying to frame her up. If I were to edit one of these and then want to apply the same edits, in some cases, like in a traditional program, I would have to create masks. And if I then pasted those edits onto another image, that would be fine, except that once she's moved, then maybe the eye enhancement would be on her cheek or on her forehead. So what Luminar does, and again, I'm just going to hit some really quick edits here, because that's so if I increase the face light, I do eye enhancement. I'm going to make her lips overly dark and red only for the sake of comparison. All right, so you can see, hopefully you can see, the different changes that have been made here. In fact, just because I can't handle it, I'm going to use some AI Enhance just to bring up the color and the contrast. So let's assume that I've just made all the edits that I want, and am happy with this. Well, I'm going to show her maybe 5 or 10 different variations. Do I want to go and now go to the next image and redo all of that? No, of course not. So what I will do instead is I will go to Image, Adjustments, Copy Adjustments. I will go back to the grid view and then select the other images, and then say Image, Adjustments, Paste Adjustments. And after a few seconds, you'll see that those images were applied, those adjustments were applied to all the images. And you can see even when she's moved in the frame, she's farther back away from the camera, her eyes are still corrected. Her lips have been accurately corrected in each case. And so if you are doing something like this where you have 20, 30, 50, 100 shots, and you need to make the same adjustments to each, the same portrait adjustments, this is a really, really great time saver for applying those. And you might end up going back in and saying, okay, well, we like this one, and that one, and then you can go and tweak them as needed. But I've just saved myself a massive amount of time trying to correct every single one with every single slider. So, let's see, 47 minutes I've been talking, and you probably have questions. How can I help you?
We do have some questions here. I think you just answered the one. Someone said, love the individual control. What about batch processing, like for a wedding? And you kind of did just show that, yeah.
Yeah, and also I should point out, I didn't really show it, but there's also a separate batch processing command. So let's say you have a folder with a bunch of different images. What you would do is, but another thing I didn't really touch on here is Luminar has this feature called Luminar looks, which are basically presets. So I could take this and I could save it as a new look, just specific to this photo shoot, and it picks up all the edits that I made. And then when I use the batch processing tool, then I can point to a folder full of images and say, apply this look to all those images. And hey, photos launched, great, okay. Next.
Great. Do you have tutorials on other things Luminar does outside of portraits? And I will say, yes, we actually have 2 other webinars with Jeff. One was on, I believe, was masking and layering. 3, is that right?
We have 3, yeah.
You're right.
So one on black and white editing, one on using masks and layers, and then one sort of general look. If you go to jeffcarlson.com, you'll find the links there.
Great. And someone is asking, can you do the steps again, please? But I'm not sure which steps they're referring to. Sorry, Sonia, if you're there, let us know what you're talking about. We can go over that again. Um, Another question: if there is glare on glasses, how do you remove it using Luminar?
Oh, that is a really good question. Glare on glasses is it, it vexes me, and vexes everybody, I think. The best way that I've seen, so you could try to like reduce the opacity sometimes. You can, whereas there's like a dehaze command that sometimes doesn't work. I found the most reliable option, honestly, is to basically use, um, depending on the image. If you have another image where there's not glare, you basically like make a selection and copy and paste and put that over. That is not as easy to do in Luminar. That's really a Photoshop tool. There's kind of a way you can do it. Um, what what Luminar does is it has the ability to, okay, remember when I went into the layers panel and we have this erased image layer, which is just an image on top of all the other layers. Well, you can import another image. So let's say you had a variation of the person where the glare is not in their glasses, but maybe it's not as good a photo. You could uh, bring that in as an image layer. So the actual thing is, it says add new. It's actually covered up by add new image layer, and then mask that so that the eye portion or the glasses portion would fit over the top of the part that has the glare. Luminar really isn't set up for that as well, because Skylim's approach is, well, you shouldn't have to do masking. Um, and like I always think that there's got to be some magic bullet, and maybe maybe some professional retouchers would be like, no, you just do this and this. But in my research, when I've had to run into this, and of course you can see, I got glasses, I've got lights. It comes up in my photography more than I would like. That the best way is you're really sort of copying and pasting pixels to fix that area. Or if you're if you're good enough, like you go in and you sort of repaint things. And I am not a retoucher at that level whatsoever. So I wish there was a better answer. But yeah.
Sonia did get back to us. She said her question about the steps was about the batch, the copy and paste. She said she looked away for a second and she missed it.
Oh yeah, certainly. Okay. So let me go back here. Never look away. Okay. So let's do, all right, I'll open this up, and actually, just because I feel really terrible about it, I'm going to change her lip redness because it looks sort of comical. All right, so we've made a bunch of edits, la 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 la, and just to make it super easy to tell, we'll apply a black and white conversion. All right, so that's been converted to black and white. So now if I go to my grid view, there we go. With this selected, I can choose image, adjustments, copy adjustments, and then select these and say image, adjustments, paste adjustments. Or another way to do it, let me just undo it. For the one that I've copied, as long as that is sort of the primary image that's selected, you can see it's got this sort of orange border versus a white border. I can say image adjustments, sync adjustments, and it will do the same thing. So that's how to do it in the library. If you wanted to apply adjustments to a bunch of folders on disk or a bunch of files on disk, then you would use the batch processing command. Okay.
Great. The next question, on the image of the girl that you edited, what was the difference in size in file from original to your edits? I guess the difference in file size.
Oh, that's a good question. So I don't really have a good answer to that because what Luminar is doing is so okay. The more factual answer is there's no difference, but that's not exactly right. So the way Luminar works is the image file itself. Let's just see. I show this in Finder. So this is a JPEG that's about 3.4 megabytes on disk. So the way Luminar works is it actually hasn't done anything to that image. So that image just is the original. It's untouched. It's non-destructive editing. So Luminar has basically just kept a record of all the edits that have been applied to it. So that's where we go back into this history panel. So it knows that at this point I applied a mystical tool to the tune of plus 89, or the sun rays, I positioned it over here, and so the only way the file name, the file size changes is if I then export this in some way. So it's not like Photoshop in that it's saving all these adjustments into the original file. So you have the file on one hand, and then you have Luminar's internal database that's storing all these. So if we threw away Luminar and just went back to the file, that file would just be the original, completely untouched. It's only when you then export a version of this that you would get sort of a finished burned in version. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
I think so. And what's the next question? How do you save the image to print later?
You would export it. There's no good print. Well, it says it will print, but oh, okay. So yeah, Luminar doesn't really print. Like you can't output this to a color printer. So you would just export it as say like a TIFF or a JPEG. There are a few different ways of doing it. You can export to image. You could actually upload it directly to 500px or SmugMug if you have those set up. But basically, then you just export the file and then use whatever you typically use to print it.
Great. And Curtis asked, does this work if different apertures, and I'm not exactly sure what he's referencing, but I think it was with the batch processing you did?
Mm-hmm. Different apertures of, Luminar isn't really looking at the aperture. So what it would be doing is like if I had, if I'm batch processing, let's say I have like 10 of these images that I shot at different apertures. Hopefully she's going to be in focus in every one. And so, the edits that I made are still going to apply to her because it's seeing a face, it's seeing, for the AI specific tools, it's looking for that information. So aperture doesn't really play into it other than it's just looking at every image as its own image. There's no depth mapping. Luminar isn't doing any of that. So like there's no way, like with an iPhone, you can get that simulated background blur. Luminar's not really doing any of that. I think that's where Aperture might come in.
Great. The last question I see is, are all tools non-destructive?
Yes. Yeah. Everything. This is sort of aggressively non-destructive. Everything in here just gets applied on top of your original. And the closest thing to destructive edits are when you do something like the erase tool, which creates its own image layer. And even then, it's not really destructive. It only means that if I have that erased layer and I wanted to go and adjust like maybe my original shadows value, that the original one on the original layer, that would not, you wouldn't see the effect of that, because you're basically putting like a brand new sheet of paper over the image. You could make the change, and underneath it on the base, the change would be reflected, but you wouldn't see it because there was this image layer in front of it. So that's why if you're using something like those two tools, you want to save that for the end, get everything, get all your tones and your colors right, and then do the little fixes, which I like, it drives me crazy sometimes, because sometimes I'll open an image and I'll see in the sky like a landscape, like a clear sky, and I'll just see, oh, I forgot to clean my lens that day. And you'll see like all those little spots in the sky if you look real closely, and like just the photographer in me, like, oh, I got to go fix all those. But if I do that, then I'm working on like an image layer rather than the raw image. That was probably completely over-explained, but I hope that answered the question.
We don't have any more questions except for one, which I can answer, which is this session to be recorded and available later? And the answer is yes. We have recorded this session, and tomorrow you will get an email with a link to watch this replay video. And we'll also put that on our YouTube channel. I think Jeff links to them on his website as well. So there's multiple ways you can access them, again, after the fact. So this information, we like to make it available to you so that you can always go back and revisit it, or if you decide to try something new, you can go back and find that old video. Our webinars are also on the Rocky Nook website under the menu heading free stuff. So go ahead and you can check out what other cool free stuff we're offering you on the website as well. If you have Jeff's book already, if it's helped you, if you enjoyed it, a review on Amazon really helps us out, helps Jeff, helps other post-processors as well to find out if Luminar 4, if this book is the book for them. And there's also a coupon code in the email you'll get tomorrow with the replay video, so that you can buy that book at 40% off if you don't already have it. So thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you to everyone for joining us today.
Thank you. Can I throw one more thing in?
Absolutely.
If you own a print copy of the book, the first few chapters are walkthroughs where it goes step by step. We weren't able to lock this down when the book was printed, but you can download those images for free so that you can actually do the steps that I describe step by step with those images. We had to make sure we had the rights and all of that. So if you have an ebook copy, that information is already in the book. If you have a print copy and you want those, send me an email, jeff@jeffcarlson.com, and I will send you the link to download those.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, and thank you everyone who joined us today.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.